All right, we showed you the video of that recent Harvard graduate who lost her job because of a video that she posted. It's been getting a ton of attention on social media for the last couple of days. She actually ended up getting fired from her job. Here she is talking about it.
The job that I had worked really hard to get and meant a lot to me just called me and fired me because, which I just got. My job that I worked really hard for.
That sounds pretty sad, doesn't it? I mean, if you just see that out of context, you feel bad for the girl. She worked hard. She obviously thought a lot of this job, and it sounds like she's a very nice person. But you got to wonder, what did she say or do that got her fired? So let's take a listen to the video that actually preceded that caused her to lose her job.
The next person who has the sheer nerve, the sheer entitled caucasity to say all lives matter, I'm gonna stab you. I'm gonna stab you. And while you're struggling and bleeding out, I'm gonna show you my paper cut and say, my cut matters too.
Oh, okay. That changes things a bit. She wants to stab people. I guess she's not as sweet as I might have thought. But check this out. Instead of taking responsibility for her words and blaming the actions, she's now blaming someone else for the consequences. And who would that be? Take a listen.
Trump supporters just took my job away from me. I've gotten death threats, rape threats, violent threats. It was okay. But now it's just like my future. My future's entirely compromised because Trump supporters have decided to come for my life. I'm too strong for you. I'm too strong for any of you. All lives matter raises Trump supporters.
So let me just say this from the get-go. Violence is never the answer for anything. No matter what you believe, we can have a civil discussion about how to change this country and the issues that affect us. Totally get that. But let's just be clear about something. She threatens people with violence who may not agree with her on an issue, regardless of where you think of that issue. And then she gets upset because that video goes viral, and then she blames people for being upset about what she said, and now she's saying they're threatening her, when she was the one who talked about stabbing them over and over again and then watching them bleed out. Let me get this straight. Who's the one that she should feel sorry for? This is absolutely ridiculous. So the thing is, will videos like this hurt the Trump re-election bid, or could they actually help? Joining us now is Tim Graham, the Director of Media Analysis of the Media Research Center. Tim, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Tim, here's the thing that I think is interesting. I want to put the issue aside from right now because that's sometimes we get too wrapped around that. As I said at the outset, violence is never, ever the answer. Regardless of what you think, we can always solve our differences, at least through civil discussions. And that's how, and then if you don't like the discussion, you figure out how to mobilize and change the laws in this country. You don't threaten people with violence, ever. But the thing that I find so funny is for 6 years I sat at the RNC, and every time little Billy would threaten somebody from, the 6th grade who happened to be running some kind of conservative club, the RNC would have to answer it. Here's someone on the left threatening violence, and there isn't a peep of this on the news. And I guarantee you, if she was advocating for some right-wing or conservative movement issue, that she would be all over the media as an example of why all people on the right are bad. But nothing, not a peep from CNN or those holy rollers and better than everyone else people at MSNBC.
Well, obviously, we have some obvious things that we pull out. The Covington Catholic kids. What did they do? Did they make any threats? They apparently had objectionable smirking, and they were a CNN sensation. So, I mean, I think you do feel bad for somebody like this, but the problem with young people today is this is their reaction to people who say things they don't like. They can't listen. They can't engage with the conversation. They get so upset with what you have to say, they say, I'm going to stab you and you're going to bleed out.
Tim, that's the point here, right? These Covington Catholic kids sit there and they don't say a word. They say nothing, and they become a media sensation and have their lives ruined. This girl threatens violence on people and wants people to weep for her because she lost her job. I can't believe that there's such a lack of media coverage for this. Tim, I appreciate you weighing in on this. I love the work that MRC is doing over there. I want to have you back real soon to be able to talk about some of the rest of the stuff that the media is covering and not covering. Thank you for being here. Have a great 4th. All right. Well, here's some good news for the president and the entire country. This morning, the June jobs report came out, and we've got a record number of jobs. 4.8 million new jobs added in the month of June. And unemployment rate fell to 11.1. That not sound great, but think about where it was a couple months ago. So let's break down these numbers for you. To be clear, there's still a lot of people unemployed, but that, as I mentioned, is way down from the 16.5% it was in May, and the total national employment is now less than 16 million. That is a 23% improvement from last month. Things are definitely looking up. So, can the president continue to ride the economic wave into November's election? Well, let's ask Tim Murtaugh, the director of communications for the Trump 2020 campaign. Tim, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Sean. Good to see you.
Good to see you. So look, every time I see a poll, whether it's a national poll or a state poll, the economy is A, the number one issue, and B, it's an issue where people think that the president does a much better job than Biden. So how do you guys from a campaign capitalize on that and say, if that's the number one issue that you care about and you trust Donald Trump to do it, then that's how you should cast your vote?
Yeah, people do trust President Trump on economic issues because he's got the record that leads people to do exactly that. Everyone knows that President Trump built the best economy that anyone alive in America had ever seen. And then it was artificially interrupted by the coronavirus. Remember, this was a global pandemic that affected every country on earth. And the Trump policies are still in place. And as we begin to emerge from the coronavirus crisis, the great American comeback is already underway. Today's jobs report is fantastic news for Americans. 4.8 million jobs, as you said. That's a new record for a single month in the history of this country. And it beat the old record that was set the month before, in May. That was the previous record holder, 2.5 million jobs. So the Trump policies are really leading us back to where we were before the global pandemic hit. And, you know, contrasted with Joe Biden, it's an easy choice. Biden has a terrible record on economic issues, and he says the first thing he'll do as president would be to raise taxes, and he'll also impose the Green New Deal on everybody. He'd be a disaster.
You know, it's funny you raise that because you're right. I mean, policy to policy, this president wins out, right? There's no question about it. The record speaks for itself, especially before we were hit by COVID and now that we're transitioning out of it. So the question is, though, every time that you look at some of these other issues, Tim, whether it's handling a COVID or all the other issues, Biden's ahead. And the question is, do you stick with the economic thing and just try to drive that train home, or do you try to best him on the other issues? Because that's the question. We've been talking a lot about how do we brand Biden. The concern I have right now is that Trump wins on the economy every time, and the results speak for themselves. But on the other issues, and that's where the Biden campaign is trying to trick you and say, hey, look over here, whether it's COVID or whatever. So how do you, from a message perspective, just say, let's make sure that we stay focused on the economy and not let these other issues enter into the lexicon as much?
Well, I think it's a question of leadership. I mean, President Trump was the leader who got the tax cuts through in the first place, and we know that Joe Biden would repeal them and raise taxes on 90% of Americans. It's also a question of leadership that Americans can see that the president has been leading the country through the coronavirus crisis from the very beginning, and all Joe Biden has done is criticize him every step along the way. Biden has been looking for relevance here and a role for himself when he has none. He claims he's been warning everybody since January about the virus, but if that's true, then why did he campaign normally into the second week of March? Biden tells nothing but a stack of lies about what he was saying and what he was doing and warning people of, while the president was out doing the hard work of actually leading the country. It used to be that we all got together and approached a big problem together as Americans, but Joe Biden has thrown that out the window. He's a political opportunist. He's trying to take a public health crisis and make it a political weapon, but Americans can see that the president has been the one actually doing the job and not sitting on his couch in his basement throwing random political bombs at his opponents.
Yeah. All right. Well, Tim, thank you for sharing that with us. We'll check back in with you real soon. Have a great 4th of July if we don't see you before then.
You too, Sean.
All right. Well, coming up, former advisor, Roger Stone, is joining us to talk about his relationship with the president, the media, and his newfound faith, and what he's feeling like with less than 2 weeks before he has to report for prison. We're going to ask him all that next.